my name is host Eric, and it's not really a debate round. Okay, hi, I'm host Eric. I'm here with host Zach, and we are on Talking with Famous People. And this is our famous person and visitor and guest, Ben.
Hello.
Welcome, Ben.
I was just about to tell Zachary a story, Ben, about when I fell out of a car when it was moving. So I wonder if you'll indulge as I tell that story right now.
By all means.
I was a small child, perhaps 7 or 8 years old, and I was riding in the VW bus, which my parents had, which is a blue, old school blue VW bus from the 60s. And I had in the back of the van with me, my mom was driving, there was my friend Paul and his little sister Sammy. And they're a family of redheads except for Paul, incidentally. Since you're a redhead, I'd note that. David, the older brother, one of my best friends, he has red hair. Paul has jet black hair. Then Sammy and Becky both have red hair. So anyway, they had the opposite percentages for that gene. It should be the other way around. They should have 1 red hair and 3 black hair, but they had the other way around. Anyway, regardless of that.
That's actually how my family is too, by the way, but continue.
Oh, okay, cool. So anyway, I had Paul and I had Becky, Paul and Sammy in the back of the van with me. And we always played a game when I was a little kid called Stand Up in the Bus, where we'd stand up in the bus and we wouldn't hold on to anything, right? And then when it went around the corner, you try to stand up. But really, you try to kind of like crash into your friends and fall over and laugh and stuff like that. Well, in this particular instance, we played Stand Up in the Bus, and Paul and I crashed into the door of the bus. And we both tumbled right out the van onto the street. And I rolled along here, and then I looked up, and literally like a bumper goes like this, and they screech into a stop right here. Like, I don't know if my head would have gone under the, I'm sure it wasn't under the tire, but it would have gone, a little bit of, anyway, I was fine. I stood up, and then I looked around, and Paul was okay too. He's a little more tore up than me, but then I saw my mom driving away, and I started crying because she was driving away, and it took her quite a while to stop. Sammy didn't tell her that we had fallen out of the bus.
That's something she just, slipped my mind. She was that inferior SI. That's what it was.
I don't know, but she was even younger than us, right? She's 2 years younger than Paul, 1 year younger than me, so I don't know. That's my exciting story. So, yeah.
At the time, I almost died. Yeah.
So wait, I was a little confused. Were you a different car almost ran you over, or like I was confused as
Yeah,
to where you fell out and like?
If I was here, right, okay, well, it was, here's the spot where I still remember, because I still live really close to that same spot. This is a street called California, and this north-south street is called Rosemead, okay? We were coming this way on California, towards the west, and this lady, had probably, I've deduced since then, I don't remember this actually happening, but based on where it was, I do remember where it was that I fell out of the bus. She probably turned right from Rosemead, only to discover somebody falling out of the car right here, rolling in front of her, and come to a stop. Because she wasn't going full speed, obviously, or she probably would have run us over. So she must have been turning right from Rosemead, which makes sense. It's a common thing to do, given it's a fairly large intersection.
Gotcha. Good
Man, that's
story.
scary. That's a very scary experience. How old were you again?
I don't know, 7 or 8? It's a long time ago.
Yeah, I've never, hopefully, I hope to not experience falling out of a vehicle anytime within my life. But,
You probably won't. I would say it's a fairly low percentage chance that if you haven't yet fallen out of a moving vehicle, that you will at some point. Is fairly low percentage chance.
I can't say I've been in that circumstance either, but.
Do either of you like to
What's the
do
time
dangerous
limit?
things?
So was that?
Do either of you like to do dangerous things?
Uh, I define dangerous. I mean,
Uh,
uh,
chance of injury, physical injury.
No, not particularly.
uh, I do, but it's not really with the intent or expectation that
Well,
I'd be injured,
obviously,
I guess.
you wouldn't
Well,
do
I
it
mean,
intentionally to
if
injure
you hit
yourself.
something, it's all relative, right? I mean, you could like fall down the stairs, walking up the stairs or whatever, you know.
That's true, but it doesn't make it as dangerous as juggling chainsaws.
What if you're just naturally a pro chainsaw juggler or something,
Well, it still wouldn't be as
And you're
dangerous
crippled.
because, because look, the likelihood of a terminal impact from a stair fall is much lower than the likelihood of a terminal impact from a chainsaw juggling accident.
Fair enough.
I'll go ahead and agree with that.
Which is why
But
I'm proposing legislation to regulate chainsaw juggling to make sure that people who juggle chainsaws have purchased enough insurance.
Yeah, and we'd like to install another HR block nearby so people can go through that to file their taxes in regards to their policies of non-chainsaw juggling.
I
the
filed
American way.
an extension. Did you file taxes, Zachary?
Mm.
Oh God,
Did you, Ben?
I still need to.
So did you file an
Uh,
extension?
I will probably. I just don't
What's
think I've made enough money to actually like for the IRS to actually pursue me. I don't know. I'm going to file taxes because I'm going to get a tax return, but
That's a good reason. Get money back. Look, try to liberate as much of our tax dollars from them as possible. They're just
yeah.
going to waste it, I promise. That's all they're going to do with it. Any dime
pretty
they
much,
get
yeah.
out of you, I guarantee you they're going to waste it.
Is there
I would,
any what areas do you think taxes are justified in, if at all?
well, I mean, I would ask the question the other way around. What is it that we actually need government to do in order to have a civil society? How much should that cost? And then figure out how we're going to pay for it, which is possibly through taxes. But if it is, I would say it would be through some sort of behavior tax rather than a income tax, something like a sales tax, which penalizes the behavior of purchasing goods and services, or potentially a, I mean, there are legitimate ways you can fund something. I would say also it matters where where the taxation comes from. The further away from you it comes, the worse. So if you're getting taxed by your street, well, I live on Sultana Avenue here. It's about 3 blocks long worth of street here in Temple City. If we were our own little city and we had to pay a street tax to the city government, and they had to pay one to the next level, blah, 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 that'd be a better way to do it. Because you don't want to have government that you don't know personally actively involved in your shit like it is now. I mean, you're supposed to keep all these records of your money coming and going so that they can steal some of it.
Yeah.
It's insane.
This is why I don't like. I guess you can call this politics. I don't know. Like, because it sounds like a lot of the things you're mentioning, kind of bureaucratic-esque ideas, just like more control of every little thing, I guess. But not that like I feel like that's a necessity, but it grinds my gears just having all these little expectations, little. You're saying behavior tax or whatever, and that just like there's so many little variables and it's just I don't know.
It's unnecessarily complicated.
Well, I mean, I feel like probably needs to be unnecessary. Well, I mean, it needs to be complicated, but I don't know. It just
I like the idea that it
I
needs
like
to be
objective.
unnecessarily complicated. That I think is a great idea right there.
uh,
We think about an example of something that would make sense to say about? That something needs to be unnecessarily complicated? Is it possible without being paradoxical?
I don't think so, because humans are fucking weird.
Anything unnecessarily complicated.
What? You can say we
Well,
need something
okay.
unnecessarily complicated in this story to represent that area of thing.
Well, think of it this way. Okay, in regards to like language, using more usually the words that are usually longer and better words are usually more specific. So, but some people think that makes language more complicated, like word theatricality. But sometimes you need like in philosophy in describing certain topics, there needs to be it needs to be kind of long-winded so that the reader doesn't misinterpret what the arguments are. So in those cases, I would argue that it needs to be unnecessarily complicated, but then I guess it's necessarily complicated. Or I mean, or it's justifiably complicated then. So I wouldn't really say it's unnecessary. I
I
don't know.
think
It's
it
a
has to
paradox.
I think it has to
That makes sense to
modify.
me. I don't
It
know.
has to modify an object that you insert into something else. We need an unnecessarily complicated plot device here to represent pedantry for our hero to fight against.
Mhm.
Like that. Like, oh, well, how are we going to demonstrate? How are we going to demonstrate that this guy is a pedant and a nerd in some fashion? Oh, well, um, let's have him explain something simple in an unnecessarily complicated way. Then you'd be saying we need something unnecessarily complicated.
I see it then. It requires the modifier, yeah.
Like what I just did there. An unnecessarily complicated explanation that was badly needed because not that the subject matter was explicated at all by the unnecessary complication, but because we were currently talking about the subject of unnecessary complication, it became necessary for me to explain that in an unnecessarily complicated way.
Right.
I'm with you on that. Communication, though, I feel like communication alone is unnecessary. I wish everyone was like a single unit that just is like, yes,
You just want binary from everybody, 0 or 1.
something like that. Yeah, I mean, it make things a lot easier, obviously, but
What answers to life's questions would you like to know, Ben?
uh, kind of putting me on the spot a little bit.
Zach?
I had a notepad. Hold on.
Don't feel on the spot. No pressure, no stress, no stems, no
Uh,
seeds.
I have a notepad over here.
I think
Well,
I wrote down things for this occasion. Uh,
what answers to life questions need to be had? Is
well,
that
just. Oh, sorry, what were you say?
I was
no,
asking if
nothing.
that was the question.
Go ahead, Ben.
Uh, Actually, a lot of what I had written down looks like it's like kind of specific. Uh, I mean, why is morality a thing? Why is life a thing? You know, just why?
What
Why is there something rather than nothing?
You know,
what
that's kind
possible
of an easiest
answers?
one to.
What possible answers to that might there be? Can we conceive of any set of possible answers to choose from?
For why is there
Like,
something rather than nothing?
could you repeat
Sure,
that?
let's take that one. Let's take that one. Why is there something rather than nothing? Is a good way to put it. What would a set of possible answers look like? What would be in that set? Are there more than one possible answer, or is the right answer the only possible answer? What can we do to narrow what we understand about what the answer ought to be, if not specifically what it is?
Uh, well, I mean, our perspective's so limited, so I feel like that's kind of rhetorical. Like, I don't think we can. That's an answerable. I don't think it's an answerable. Period.
So is that answer that you just gave me then? Can I conclude from that we should eliminate rhetorical, rhetorically derived solutions from the possible list of possible solutions?
And the possible list of possible
I mean, from
solutions.
the list of possible solutions, so we remove it from that list because of what you just said.
Yeah, probably. I mean,
Okay, that's fair. Then I mean, you're making a legit
I
claim. Then
think so.
you're
Is that?
you're not just blowing smoke if you say that. If you say okay, well, yeah, and we should not consider that.
I.
But how else are
Yeah.
you going to consider it? In visual terms or what?
I mean, I probably. I mean, I have considered it in the past. I don't really consider it anymore, and I I don't know. I feel like it's kind of not necessarily a waste of time, but it's kind of
In
fruitless.
vain?
Like, yeah,
In vain?
yeah, sure.
Zachary, what are your thoughts on that?
Well, I don't know if I accept that it's in vain because then that kind of gives us a justifiable reason to no longer pursue the answer to it, right? So it kind of removes yourself from the pursuit, and then you make your own grave, so to speak. You can never find the truth.
Well, I think that if you conclude that it's in vain, then you are implying that one, there's an understood purpose that will fail to be met by determining that, and two, that it's possible that such a question might be answered. I think is necessitated as well by the notion of something being pointless. Seems to imply that one can conceive of a universe in which such thing might have a point, that it's not a category error, unless it is. Now you might say, if I say, well, that banana is an atheist, you wouldn't say that statement is false. You'd say it's a category error. It's not neither true nor false. It's not using words in a sensible way.
Is that what you're claiming then?
I'm
That
not claiming
asking.
that,
Oh,
but
is that?
go. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Oh, I was just asking if that's what is that what Ben is saying then? It's a category error. It's a categorical error.
You might be to ask the question.
I mean, I think so. I wouldn't even like put it in a, probably go as far to as to put it in a category, but that's kind of, I haven't done enough reading, but as far as I can tell, I'm more of a nihilist sort of viewpoint on things. So,
What is that viewpoint? I don't really understand exactly what, or what are you referring to? Can you explain a little bit more what that view might look like if you're talking that you refer to as nihilism? Because I know people use the word in a lot of different ways.
uh, arbitrariness, I think that's a word. Arbitrariness, yeah. Like just kind of, uh, sort of the core of, I guess it'd be the core of humanity, whatever that is sort of flawed, like essentially, like the idea of kind of this sort of linear, like you ask why something from nothing, and it's people like inherently or innately have a sort of answer to that, even though they don't really know what that is. And I think that in itself is flawed. I mean, I think that's kind of what maybe nihilism claims as well. Like I said, I probably haven't done quite enough reading to verify that, but
You don't need to read to verify ideas or have
well, it's
ideas.
philosophy, so it's kind of I don't know. It's there's people have talked about this in the past, you know. I don't
I
know.
haven't read shit, so I haven't read anything. I talk about people I haven't read all the time. Oh yeah, that
I don't
guy
know if
said
that
that.
answered your question with what my viewpoint was or not, but
I think it sort of did. You said
I don't
basically
know.
that it rejects the notion of asking and answering that question.
Like there's kind of well, they kind of like the perspective kind of I think kind of dwells upon like whether to ask the question or not. So I guess in itself it is asking the question, but it's saying that it's kind of contradictory to ask, but kind of it's kind of they just think about it, I guess, whether to ask the question or not. Yeah.
Zachary, thoughts
On nihilism,
on yeah, or anything that you've heard thus far on whatever.
I see the appeal of nihilism. I think that I think if you struggle to find some purpose within the external world, it's not going to come to you, especially through a scientific examination. Because in regards to science, it seems like we usually struggle to understand the the utility of certain objects within the external world and their origins, and not necessarily the essence or the purpose of them being there. So, with regards to like trying to find a purpose in the external world, I think that nihilism is the obvious uh, conclusion through that path. But I reject nihilism mostly because, or I guess primarily I reject it because I think to find purpose that we should make more of an effort, especially in psychology, to examine the ways in which we perceive the world and how we can manipulate the ways in which we perceive information to come to better understandings of the information. So I think through that we could develop some sort of meaning or purpose. What that meaning or purpose is, I don't know yet. This is just super infantile thoughts here, but those are my thoughts.
I think that's
Well,
probably like where my perspective differs because I'm more of a scientific oriented person, I guess. Not that you're not, but like just sort of, the whole logical, like rational way of thinking about, I guess, yeah, everything.
Well, I'm not saying science is important. It's not science's job to ask for the purpose of things, right? Science is the purpose of science is to understand the origins of certain objects and to understand its utility.
Good
It's
point.
not it's not really its job to question why. It's just to understand how things interact with the world.
I think
At least
it's
that's how
to
I
be
view it.
predictive. I think it's to be predictive. Okay, explanatory
Hmm.
in ways that are meaningfully testable and predictable. So if you're doing engaged in real science, you're mostly concerned with the replicatability of your results, of the ability to exclude from a given situation variables you don't want, and the ability to then repeat that over and over again and see what happens in terms of the data. And then the conclusion drawing part of that isn't really so much the science as it is the only part that would interest somebody like me, or I would guess Zach as well, is more so than the stirring things around in beakers, Um, but what I would suggest is each of us is drawn to truth through some avenue or another, and that's probably the best rejection of nihilism. That nihilism itself is drawn to truth through that particular avenue, and it's an avenue that's maybe rejected as non-truth by a lot of people, but it has its own truth that draws seekers to it and draws to it adherence to its words, basically, who people who identify with and or echo certain of the sentiments that are expressed by texts known as nihilism. So, in that regard, it's a worldview. I think that it reflects one's two things. It reflects one's natural inclination towards truth, whether you are inclined to find it as discovered or created, and it reflects one's natural attitude towards disruption, how high that is up in your stack. Higher it up is in your stack, you're more likely to seek truths through disrupting existing truths, breaking apart falsehoods, right? Attacking things that have weaknesses because they have falseness within them is the specific job of the NTP in general. And so that's generally what we do. But there's a lot of different avenues towards that, and I think all of us are looking for something that's like solid to stand on to understand everything else through, and we're going to pick somewhere. It's not that any of those particular avenues is better, it's whatever works for us based on our cognitive functions.
That's a good way to put it.
And I do think I was kind of talking a little bit broadly when I was just saying science, you know. It's kind of just like, I don't know, it's the way, it's kind of my sort of like that is the reason that everything is science, you know.
I don't think it's too broad. I mean, I think the nice thing about science is that you can define it, really. You define it as a process that you do to achieve data. And to prioritize that as a means of understanding truth is, in a lot of ways, the most sensible thing to prioritize. And therefore, in fact, the one that in most contexts will have the most general respect from intelligent people as legitimate, right? So stuff like this that's a little mushy, the psychology kind of stuff, it has mixed level of respect and certainty that people express in regards to it. You know what I'm saying?
Mm-hmm.
It looks like we have a new guest. Let me stop this video now. Any last thoughts for the three of us before we include Christiane B here?
I don't have any particular thoughts.
I don't think so. I think you've wrapped that up pretty good.
All right, cool.